your smiling faces on this cold morning, actually, though it's going to get warmer, of course. I'd like to welcome you, and I'd like to welcome members of the Friendship Force from Ottawa who have joined us for this morning's talk, and our members, of course. Thank goodness, you know, I'm really looking forward to spring. It's been really cold. I think most of you heard that we will be having a management committee meeting at the beginning of March to talk about hopefully reopening and meeting in person, but we're not going to commit to anything right now. And I'm certainly looking forward to today's talk. I'm going to turn it over to Paul. Oh, wait a minute. No, reports. I think Jean's here. Do you have anything to report for membership, Jean?
We have one new friend since our last meeting, and that's all that's happened.
Well, that's perfect. One new friend is a lot better than no new friends.
That's right. Hopefully there'll be new members too.
Good. Thank you very much. Okay, Paul, you can go with your joke. Unmute yourself. Unmute yourself.
Voila, how's that?
That's good.
Well, there's Reba McIntyre, singer, a delightful person who says something that's appropriate for today. To succeed in life, you need three things. One, you need a backbone, right? You need a wishbone, and you need a funny bone.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you very much. That's lovely. Okay, I'm going to now ask Wayne to give us an update on the plowing match.
Morning, everyone. Fun to be here as usual. So this is what he calls like a duck on a pond, right? It's kind of serene on the top, paddling like the devil underneath. There's a meeting of all of the directors and chairs of the committees. There's about 52 committees, which is in a spreadsheet that looks like this, that we get to maintain, of everybody who's running a particular section of something and needs volunteers underneath them. So we have, I think we're still looking for 4 committee chairs, but we have a meeting this Saturday at the South Mountain Hall of all of the directors to make sure we're all organized there. In terms of volunteers, we've got a good running start. We've got about 400. The problem is we need about 11 to 1,200. So the math on that is pretty simple. And my message to you is really simple. Talk to anybody you can who you think might be interested and say, go sign up. We've got a place for you. And people can do as little as a half a day, a full day. You know, we've broken it up into afternoons, mornings, afternoons, or all day. So you can kind of pick what openings you might have in your schedule and work through that. So lots to do. We're going to start to see, I think you're going to start to see more, obviously more stuff on the ground. I'm only on the fringes of what's going on, hearing about what the municipality and the government and the adjoining lands and stuff like that. But I'm pretty confident all that's going to get worked out so that we've got the space we need, and it's going to be a wonderful event, weather permitting.
Good. Thank you very much, Wayne. And I'm certainly looking forward to going to the plowing match, and I hope everybody else is as well. It's usually a really wonderful happening. Jean, you have a question?
Wayne, I would be interested in volunteering for just about anything, but when I look at your list of activities, they are so non-descriptive that I don't know what I would be getting myself involved in. And I wonder if there's a possibility of telling us who is in charge of the various committees so that we can contact the person and find out more what it's about.
I can do that, but I can't send it out as a bulk communication per se. So Jean, my email is waynebrown@ripnet.com. if you want to send me an email afterwards, or anybody else has any questions, I'll happily respond to you individually. And like I say, I've got this sheet in front of me, so I can tell you I wish I could tell you more about the details. Like I said before, I've never been to a plowing match because I was always busy working on the farm, but I'll tell you what I know. And from there, I can absolutely point you to the chairs of the people who are still looking, or the directors who are still looking for committee members or committee chairs.
Okay, thank
Thank
you.
you. That would be good.
Good. Wayne, could you just repeat your email? I think maybe a
Yeah.
couple of other people would like it.
So it's Wayne Brown, no dots, dashes, underlines, anything else like that. Wayne Brown at RIPNet, RIPNET.com.
Thank you very much.
Let me know you're with the PROBUS group too. Otherwise I might go, who?
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Right, Anna, I am going to turn it over to you to introduce our speaker from Osteoporosis Canada.
Thank you, Rowena. Our speaker this morning is Ann Harrison, and she retired from over 32 years as an educator not long before the pandemic started. What timing. During her career, she had the privilege of teaching secondary school chemistry and computer science for many years before becoming a secondary school principal and then a system leader of student success for her school board, and now volunteers with several groups in the Niagara region, including public health mass immunization clinics, her local Rotary Club, Leadership Niagara, and with the board of the local youth homeless shelter. Ann's personal journey with osteoporosis started over 3 years ago. While she continues to work to improve and maintain her bones, she strives to educate others through making bone health presentations. I present Ann Harrison.
Thanks so much, Anna, and thanks, Rowena, and all of you. It's a pleasure to join all of you from, I want to say sunny Niagara, but it's snowy Niagara. We've had more snow this winter than I recall in the last 5 years. So I'm going to share my screen and just give me a second here. So you should see on your screen a slide that says Presentation Bone Health 101. A few thumbs up, I see.
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect. So I seem to have a little bit of a tickle in my throat. My plan this morning is to go through this presentation, and I'm hoping either Rowena or Anna, if I'm starting to go too long, just let me know, just interrupt me and say, you know, you've got 5 minutes left or something like that. I would like to give us an opportunity at the end to open it up to the floor for questions, which I can take either at the end through chat or through just raising your hands, and we can unmic and chit chat. So this is a presentation that is created by Osteoporosis Canada, which is a national organization that works on supporting the understanding of osteoporosis and has a fantastic website, which I will share with you and talk about throughout. So we are an organization, and our overall mission is to educate, empower, and support individuals and communities, both those who have osteoporosis, but more importantly, we want to work towards risk reduction of osteoporosis and osteoporotic fractures. We have a scientific advisory council, volunteer clinicians, researchers, educators. They are all experts in osteoporosis and bone metabolism. They advise us, they help work on this presentation, and they give us our current medical issues and updates. I am a volunteer educator, so I'm not an expert. I am not, as Anna said, my background is not in the medical field. And so I can't answer medical questions, but I can answer about my personal journey. So what I'm going to do today is hopefully get through all of these components, a little bit of the science of bones, a little bit of discussion about fracture risk assessment, a little bit about medication options, and then hopefully get into the nutrition, exercise, and movement. And then if we have enough time at the end, how to prevent slip, trips, and falls and broken bones. So bone basics, just for those of you who perhaps don't have a science background, bone is a living and growing tissue. Everybody sometimes thinks it's a bit static, but it's not. It's a living tissue. It's a framework, outer skeleton of protein hardened by calcium and other minerals. And the reason we're showing a bone alongside a bridge is so that you can see that there's the framework, but there's also some open spaces. The amount of actual bone tissue is called your bone mass, and your bone density is considered to be how compact that is, how much bone you have in that area. Because it's living tissue, the remodeling process is ongoing all the time. So all the way through your growing stages, you have two different cells that work on bone. So one are called osteoclasts. They tend to create cavities on the bone surface at all times, so digging away at it. And then the osteoblasts, another kind of cell, come in and fill it in to repair it. So that's an ongoing and constant process. The mass of bone that you have does change with age. We do start losing bone at the rate of about 1% per year once we hit our mid-30s. And so if you can see here in this graph, both for males and for females, your bone mass peaks in your mid-20s up to about 30 years old. And then for everybody in the population, it starts to decline. For women at menopause, it increases at a greater rate. So wherever menopause is, that will start to increase it. It is slower in men, but then after age 65, we start seeing that men are declining as well. And the challenge becomes that bone loss can become such that you risk fracturing. So I just wanted to circle that area there. I don't know if you can see that pink or pinky purple sort of area. That's where your mass, bone mass, is most important. And so the challenge becomes, we want to get the message out to people to work on increasing their bone mass as much as possible. So that, you know, it's really, if you know people who are in their teens and 20s, that's when you really need to work on increasing your bone mass as much as you can. So what is osteoporosis? Well, it's a disease characterized by a low bone mass, so a deterioration of bone tissue. And it can lead to increased risk of fracture, but it is not osteoarthritis. So it's not that arthritis piece. It's actually a loss of bone tissue. So what I'm showing here are two different pictures of bone. The one on the left is a healthy bone. It's got a high bone density, a high bone mass. There's a lot of tissue there. There is air spaces, but there's a lot of structure. The one on the right would be a picture of an osteoporosis bone, in that there's a lot more air involved. The tissue there's a lot less tissue. The density, therefore, is a lot less. And you can see that that would be a much more fragile piece of bone. There are two general types of osteoporosis. Primary osteoporosis is that which is associated with menopause age, or simply an unknown cause. In other words, you develop osteoporosis over time. That's my kind of osteoporosis. Secondary bone loss is when you have osteoporosis or bone loss that's associated with some kind of other disease. So there are diseases like diabetes, chronic kidney disease, Crohn's disease, that can also lead to bone loss. And there's medications such as prednisone and glucocorticoids that also lead to bone loss. So if you look at your common fracture sites, over 80% of all fractures after age 50 are likely caused, the underlying issue becomes osteoporosis. So most bone breaks after 50, you need to ask your physician if it's possible that it was osteoporosis. And in particular, if there's fractures in these common areas, so the shoulder, the hip, the wrist, and the spine. So in my instance, I have 7 vertebral fractures, and those were what triggered an investigation into osteoporosis for me. Fragility fractures are broken bones that happen spontaneously or as a result of normal daily activities, a fall from standing height, something along those lines. Those are all considered fragility fractures, and they're the most serious sign of osteoporosis. And so in my instance, it was some falls from standing height that led to my diagnosis. I know people who rolled over in bed and broken a rib. So those types of activities, lifting a heavy object. Any of those kind of fragility fractures, wrist fractures, hip fractures, you need to be talking to your physician about getting a bone mineral density test. Often, sometimes people call it a bone mass density test. That kind of, they're both, it's the same test, just different people call it different things. But it is that examination of how dense your bone tissue is. So spinal fractures can result in a number of different things. And these are kind of the typical pictures that one associates with osteoporosis. Somebody perhaps who's quite straight and tall then starts to lose some height as a result of the change in the bone structure, and starts to kind of roll over. And the result of this is you get shorter, there's back pain, this disturbs your sleep, but also you end up with a protruding abdomen. If you think about the fact that if you have a spinal shrinkage of a couple of inches, your organs that are usually against the spine do have to go someplace. So they're now starting to come forward, and you get what's called that kyphosis, or used to be called a dowager hump, right? The hump at the back of the shoulders there, that's a typical sign of osteoporosis. The challenge becomes there are impaired activities of daily living, or there can be. And so, you know, that's something, this is one of the reasons we want to reduce the risk of fractures. Height loss then is a really early warning sign. You might not realize that you have broken your spine. You might not have all the back pain and everything like that. It may, because it can be an activity of daily life, you may not have realized that you've broken something. So if you measure yourself 3/4 of an inch in 1 year, or 2.5 inches since young adulthood, any of those should trigger looking at a spinal x-ray and doing an assessment for osteoporosis. So that's one of your real signs, because sometimes it's a bit of a hidden and silent thief, right? Hip fractures, another thing that's a real challenge that we want to look at. 40% of people who fracture hip had a prior non-hip fracture that wasn't recognized as a sign of osteoporosis, so maybe a lumbar fracture that they didn't know about. And so it's important, if you've had a hip fracture, to get an analysis. Just to give you an idea of how the incidence of osteoporotic fractures, 1 in 3 women, 1 in 5 men have fragility fractures, and they're in fact more common than heart attack, stroke, and breast cancer combined. So they're certainly out there. There's a number of people probably on this call who either are aware that they have osteoporosis, have had an osteoporotic fracture and aren't aware of that, or have an osteoporotic fracture and are aware of that. We also want to dispel the myth that this is just a women's disease. Men also get osteoporosis. It is substantially underreported and underdiagnosed, and therefore it becomes undertreated. And so fewer than 10% of men with fragility fractures receive any kind of osteoporosis therapy. And yet they do have hip fractures, they do get osteoporosis. And the challenge becomes that it's seen that men, if they get hip fractures, have more complications and leading to death. So the big thing is, how do we know? How do we know? These bones are inside us, we can't see them. Until you get a fracture, you don't know what's going on inside your body. It's very hard to tell. And so it's important that you get a bone mass or bone mineral density test. So all women and men, if you're 65 years or older, you should be chatting with your primary physician and asking, if you haven't already had one, for a test, and then following up with where the results are. postmenopausal women and men between age of 50 to 64 if they're at risk of fracture. So when we say that, you need to look at family history as well. If there's a family history of osteoporosis and you're in that 50 to 64 age range, then having that conversation again. And younger men or women under 50, if they have a disease or a condition. So I talked about some of those conditions like celiac and Crohn's. You might want to be getting a bone mass scan and talking to your physician regarding that. So what it does, and I'm going to go back one here. It's a non-invasive. It is a full body scan. They take a scan of your hips, your wrists, and your spine. You're lying on it. Literally, it takes about 10-15 minutes, not even. And you're just making sure you're not wearing anything that's metal or anything like that. And it's quite quick, non-invasive. It's not uncomfortable, provided you can lie comfortably on your back. What they do is they take those results, they look at your age, your sex, they look at your fragility, fracture, if any kind of other previous fractures you've had, family history, as I said, and other risk factors like diseases and drugs. And then they give you a more accurate prediction of fracture risk, and you divide categories into 3 categories. So a low risk, a moderate risk, and a high risk fracture. In the past, they used to say you were osteoporosis, osteopenia. They tend not to use that term. Some doctors still do. Osteopenia is that moderate risk group that they often talk about. But now they, as I say, the terminology has changed a little bit. So nowadays, based on Osteoporosis Canada's 2010 guidelines, high fracture risk, those people that are in that category as a result of that full analysis and full conversation with a physician, likely to receive medication and then repeat these tests every 1 year or every 3 years, depending on your situation. So when I got into that category, got on a medication, and every year I go for a follow-up appointment to see where I'm at. The moderate risk after this analysis, depending on circumstances, it might be that you get put on medications. It might be just some monitoring. The challenge becomes if you fall into this category and you haven't had that follow-up appointment with your physician and don't know, then you don't know to monitor things. Low risk, you wouldn't be receiving any kind of medication, and your testing wouldn't happen for another 5 to 10 years unless something changes, such as a fracture. Medication options, there are a number of different medications that get offered as a treatment protocol for high risk and sometimes for moderate risk. The goals of the medication is to reduce the fracture risk, to prevent further bone loss, and to increase bone mass. So you can actually start to work to increase your bone mass and make it stronger, which would reduce fracture risk. You can also, because there's 2 different cells, the ones that rebuild and the ones that dig out, you can slow the rate that the bone is being chewed away at. It's the 2 different types of cells that get worked at, right? The medications are looking at slowing down the rate that bone gets carved away and increasing the rate that bone gets rebuilt. So the challenge is, because you can't see your bones, because you're not going for another scan for another full year or longer, you're taking your medication without having any knowledge about whether it's working or not. You're not going to feel any different. The only way to know is when you do your next bone scan, which might be 1 to 3 years later. And so you just have to trust that it's working and look at some of the side effects, but discontinuing it could mean that you result in bone loss. So one of the other treatment protocols that's really important, and this is whether you have osteoporosis or not. A healthy diet can do a lot to ensure that you build your bone mass, maintain your bone mass, and don't lose your bone mass. So nutrition is really, really important because bone is living tissue. So the choices we make in food, what we're putting in our body, we want to make sure we're maintaining the best bones for our body and making sure that what we're putting in is appropriate. So we talked about what bone was in the bone basics. It's protein, and calcium and vitamin D are involved as well. Calcium is one of the key minerals that makes bone hard. And so making sure you have enough calcium in your diet is important. but calcium is only absorbed with vitamin D. So you have to have vitamin D so that you can absorb the calcium from your gut. Without vitamin D, you can eat all the calcium you want, which it's not going to be absorbed through your gut. And then protein is essential to build and maintain collagen in the bone, which is important for growth maintenance and fracture healing. So it's these three components. And if you do go to the Osteoporosis Canada website, they have a link to recipes, and they show you some fantastic recipes using Canadian grown product that are really great for bone health. I'm going to focus first off on calcium. Calcium has a lot of roles. It's found in cells, it's found in skeleton and teeth, and it's found in your bone and your blood. The key is if your body doesn't have enough calcium for the cells, the blood, the skeleton, and the teeth, it has to take it from the only place where it stores it. And the only place calcium is stored in your body is your bone. So if it's not enough there for your cells and your blood to function, it will withdraw from the bone. So your body says, I don't have enough calcium. I'm going to go to my calcium store. That's the bone, and I withdraw it. So 99% of the body's calcium is found in your bones and teeth, and you want to make sure you're maintaining that. So we've got a list here of quantities of daily calcium requirement. And presuming that most of the groups I present to the population is the 50 plus, you need 1200 milligrams if you are in that age range. You need 1200 milligrams of calcium every day. And it's important that you're maintaining that. So Osteoporosis Canada recommends, though, that your calcium is coming from food sources wherever possible. It's the best, most natural way for you to get the calcium you need for healthy bones. So it's important that you're getting enough of it in your diet and that you're not taking extra, do not take extra supplements if you're getting enough, because if there's too much calcium in your body, it can put a strain on your kidneys. So you want to get that balance. You want to make sure you're getting it through your diet, supplement if you aren't, but make sure you don't get too much calcium. And so again, on the Osteoporosis Canada website, there is a calcium calculator, and it's a really great tool that you can click on and you type in what you're eating, and it shows you how many milligrams of calcium you're getting from, say, a half a cup of milk or something along those lines. And that gives you an idea of how much calcium you're getting in your diet. And then you can work on how much additional calcium you might want in a supplement. So calcium supplements, a lot of people take these. And you know, the challenge becomes calcium is something you need at all times during the day. So taking all of your calcium, so for example, you might take a calcium supplement with your breakfast where you have maybe yogurt and then you don't have anything else with calcium all day long. That's not going to be helpful. You want to space your calcium out throughout the day. So you want to either have your supplement or ingest your calcium through food all day long, so you have that constant source. Never take a supplement of more than 500 milligrams at any one time. And I cannot stress enough how important it is to read the labels of anything that you're taking, obviously, but of any of your calcium supplements, because it's kind of a little shocking to me to see some of the calcium supplements that are out on our shelves have far more calcium in them in one pill than we need in a day, or, you know, based on having a fairly regular amount of calcium in your diet. And the other thing is you do have to be careful and read the labels about calcium carbonate should not be taken with food. Calcium citrate can be taken on an empty stomach. So again, calcium carbonate must be taken with food. Calcium carbonate can be taken on an empty stomach. So again, reading that label and following the directions. But again, don't overconsume on calcium. I actually get my calcium levels checked, on my blood checked on a regular level to manage. I look at that calcium calculator fairly regularly, and I take a very low dose calcium, but I take it every single day. And I change when I take it based on what I've been eating that day. But it's all not worth anything unless you take your vitamin D. Vitamin D is so important for helping build stronger bones, because any kind of calcium, whether it's in your diet or whether it's a supplement, isn't absorbed unless you have vitamin D. And there are very, very few natural sources of vitamin D, especially for us in the Northern Hemisphere. Vitamin D comes from the sun, but there's not a lot of actual natural sources for consuming vitamin D. So Osteoporosis Canada recommends that everybody takes a daily vitamin D supplement if you're 19 ages plus. And again, let's say everybody on the call is 50 plus, you're taking 800 to 2,000 international units a day. Again, a lot of people want to say, well, I'll take a calcium and vitamin D combo pill, but sometimes to get the amount of vitamin D, you might overdo the calcium. So I've taken a close look at all of these, and I end up taking a vitamin D that's separate from my calcium so that I can increase the amount of vitamin D without overdoing the amount of calcium. So that's just a tip that I've gone through myself. Vitamin D is also important for the function of muscles. And so that all helps with your balance, and that helps prevent falls, which we don't want to be falling. Finally, you do have to have enough protein in your diet to, in addition to calcium and other minerals, because you have to, bone is made of protein. It's important for bone strength and flexibility. It does help with your healing. And so eating a protein-rich diet, however you're getting your protein, is really important. One of the things that you can add to your diet, and it really helps with the protein, but it also helps with your calcium, is canned salmon with the bones. And if you use that, that adds your calcium, your protein, it's great. So exercise and movement, though, it's really important that bones are developed as we move them, as we put weight on them. So anytime we're using muscle to generate force against resistance, we're strength training, this actually helps to build our bones. And so it's important that we include appropriate exercises for our own personal situation in each of our major muscle groups. So lower legs, upper legs, chest, back, shoulders, and arms. Any kind of work, you can use free weights, you can use weight training machines, you can use exercise bands, you can be lifting your own body weight if that's something you can do. So a push-up against a counter, any of those activities help build bone strength. So as an example, if you want to be working on your arms, your back and your shoulders, even just as you're waiting, maybe you're making yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, you're waiting for the kettle to boil, you're standing there and you're doing a push-up against the counter, right? So pushing yourself away and back from the counter. That is using your muscles to generate force against resistance. So it sounds like a little thing, but doing some of that is really, really important. Another thing that's really important is to check regularly that you have the rectangle of good posture. Reminding yourself, balancing your weight evenly on both of your feet, draw your belly in, keep your gaze straight, gently tuck in your chin, and draw your breastbone up slightly to make sure that you've got good posture. Really, really important to always have good posture. If you're going for a walk with somebody, my posture, because of the way my lumbar has worked, I have some scoliosis. I can start tipping to the side quite easily if I don't think about it. And all my friends, we kind of joke about it now. They go, Anne, you're tipping. And so then I have to think about when I'm walking to make sure I'm walking straight, keeping my posture, and that makes sure your muscles are being evenly developed as well. Balance training is so, so important, especially as we age, regardless of osteoporosis. We want to make sure we have balance and coordination. That way, if we stumble, we can correct ourselves quite quickly. So performing exercises every day that challenge our balance, whether that's, again, standing waiting for that cup of tea or waiting for something to, toast to pop up, holding on to a countertop if you have to, or not if you can do it without, and just being on one foot. We've done a lot of waiting in lines recently, and if you can wait in line and balance on one foot without falling over, I mean, you may need a chair, in which case don't be doing that in your lineups. But anytime you can, any kind of classes, as classes open up at community centers, any kind of balance exercises, so Tai Chi, for example, any kind of exercises that help you move, yoga, Pilates, any of those, and increase the difficulty and intensity of your balance exercises over time. Again, it helps for if there's a potential for correcting a slip, trip, or fall, and it helps just with our general muscle tone as well. The really number one important one is the weight-bearing aerobic physical activity. It's the most beneficial when bones and muscle are working together against the force of gravity. And so somebody earlier was saying about bike riding, swimming are fantastic cardio opportunities, but they're not doing a lot for your bone strength because on your bike, you're being supported by the bicycle, and the water, you're supported by the water. So you want to add into your exercise routine exercises that are weight-bearing aerobic physical. And this doesn't mean you're walking around with weights. It simply means against the force of gravity. So there's nothing supporting you like a bike or water. You're walking, you're dancing, you're doing step aerobics. These can be in 10-minute bouts. It doesn't have to be 30 minutes, but moderate to vigorous activity most days of the week if you can. So, you know, I overheard somebody saying that they're walking their dog. So if you're going out for a walk, 10 minutes with your dog 3 times a day, every day, fantastic. You're doing some weight-bearing aerobic physical activity. If you want to increase the pace of that, that's great. Treadmills are good, especially if you're worried about the ice. So treadmills are good, hiking is good. If there's a dance class you can be involved in, getting involved in something like that. All of the exercises too, if you go to the osteoporosis.ca website, there's a whole downloadable series of videos and supports on exercises that are good for people with osteoporosis. I do caution that depending on your situation, you might want to talk to your physician before doing anything such as lifting heavy weights above your head. That's contraindicated if you have spinal fractures. And so there are certain exercises that you want to talk through with. There are individuals in community centers who are bone fit specialists. The list is on the Osteoporosis Canada website. And a bone fit specialist runs exercise classes specifically for people who are at risk of osteoporosis, who have osteoporosis. And so they teach things like how to pick a grandchild up off the floor, how to get groceries out of your car, how to do your gardening and your house cleaning in a safe fashion. And so that's really important. The twisting becomes complicated and problematical. So again, just avoid movements that involve rapid, repetitive weighted, step to turn instead of twisting. So any kind of twists on the spine are problematical. How you lift things, how you lift laundry baskets or grandchildren. If you're doing it, make it slow and controlled twist and never to the end of your motion, and be careful about any kind of weights over your head, as I mentioned. So this is the booklet I was talking about, Too Fit to Fracture. There's websites and everything, and it's a series of exercises, some of which are done chair exercises, and so they give you all your options there for, you know, what to do if you're not as mobile. But again, if you're concerned, talk to a physician or a bone health specialist regarding that. A key, however, though, is the more that we can prevent falling and breaking our bones, the better off we are. So we want to make sure we're doing everything possible to prevent falls and broken bones. 1 in 3 adults over the age of 65 fall every year. Over the age of 80, it can be 1 in 2. And I think we probably all know somebody who had a bad fall and it was just downhill from then on in. So whatever we can do to avoid those falls, because once you've fallen once, there's a greater chance of falling again. And 95% of hip fractures in those over the age of 65 are the result of a fall and can lead to some serious complications. The challenge becomes is what's called a fall cycle, that if you fall, you then develop a fear of falling again, which means oftentimes you stop doing certain activities. You decrease the activity because you're afraid. As you decrease activity, you lose strength and mobility, which actually increases your risk of falling, which increases your fear of falling. And so it becomes this vicious circle. So people stop going out and about, they stop doing things, they stop doing that walking. You know, I myself, I have fear of falling on the ice. I will fully admit it. And so there's lots of days in the wintertime that I'm walking on my treadmill instead of hiking the trails, but I've also developed strategies. So certain strategies that you can develop to make sure that you don't fall. Having your vision and hearing checked. Good vision, you can see things. Hearing, so that you can hear and adapt to what you're listening to. Making sure your medications are reviewed. Blood pressure medications, for example. So having your blood pressure checked. Footwear. Take better care of your feet and review your footwear, making sure they're good non-slip footwear. There's boots now that you can flip out the spikes and put the spikes back in. Participating in a regular exercise program, which includes balance. Because again, you know, if you've got good balance, then if something happens, you can right yourself. Eat that well-balanced diet and stay hydrated. Read your bottles of calcium and vitamin and make sure your vitamin D, make sure that those are good. Review your home for safety hazards to make sure that, you know, you don't have loose carpets or extension cords you can trip on, anything like that, locked, you know, shoes in the middle of the hallway or in your laundry room or something like that. Learn more about equipment, both for home independence and for safety outside. So for example, grab bars to get in and out of bathtubs or showers, making sure you have appropriately installed handrails for going up and down any of the stairs outside or inside your home. If you're going out for walks, for myself, I would never dream of going out for a walk on rough terrain or in snowy, icy conditions without my walking poles. And I always use 2 walking poles to, again, make sure I don't, if I'm only using one, I tend to tip to the one side. So 2 walking poles is one of my strategies to make sure I also have that rectangle of balance happening. But it's also a great opportunity to make sure that I've got 3 points of contact at all points, whether it's the 2 poles and 1 foot as I'm lifting a foot up, or, you know, my 2 feet and one of my poles if I'm lifting my poles up. And you can even take walking pole classes to learn about all the other stretching and balance exercises you can do with your walking poles. And so there's lots of people who are using walking poles, and it's a great resource. It's also a lot better than a cane or a walker, because both canes and walkers tip you over, and you want to be keeping those shoulders up. So walking poles are a much better opportunity for you. And there's other, like, everybody will develop their own list if there's other things that you can think of. So this is just an idea, an example of some of the things. We do have lots of resources online. If you're living with osteoporosis, you can join into, we have a osteoporosis support group. Kathy Piercy is the person that I think probably Anna connected to get this set up today. She is responsible for Ontario and the East Coast, and that's her contact information. If you take out that info at osteoporosis.ca, the website is just that, osteoporosis.ca. And so you can go there for your calcium calculator. You can go there for the Too Fit to Fracture. There's some videos there. The recipes are there. Plus also tons of information about where you can go for additional help. Kathy is our Ontario and East Coast person. I don't know Sandy. I've had emails from her, but Saskatchewan and Manitoba region are led by Sandy. If you have people out in that area that want support and information. As I said, also online, Know Your Risk, there's an assessment tool, the calcium calculator, all kinds of brochures and fact sheets, a newsletter that you can sign up for, and you can follow Osteoporosis Canada on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, as well as LinkedIn. So that's all for me. There's that website again, osteoporosis.ca. Thanks for listening today. We do want to make sure as many Canadians as possible become unbreakable. I'm going to stop sharing and open it up for comments and questions. It's kind of like speed dating. There we go.
And Anna is going to moderate.
Awesome. So I'm open for any questions, comments, sharing, anything like that.
Does anybody have a question? David has a question. Yes, if you.
Yeah, I'm just curious if I know most people lose height as they grow older,
Mhm.
does that signify that you have osteoporosis? Like I know myself, I've lost at least 2 inches in, say, the last 10 years or so.
Right.
But as far as I know, my bone scans have been good. I have a condition that my doctor monitors my bone density every 3 years or so.
Right. So I think, great question, David, and thank you for asking that. Bone height loss is something that should make you look, right? Doesn't mean you have osteoporosis, but I'm glad to hear that your physician is monitoring that with some bone density scans, because it is because this is a silent disease, it's happening inside our bodies without us really knowing. All we can do is look at some of the external things. So bone height is one thing that would make you look. But if you then look and find you're okay, then you're good. But it is something that, yes, many of us will lose some height. 2.5 inches since adulthood would be the trigger where we start looking. And so it depends on when that happens and, over time and so on and so forth, right? And it's that 3/4 of an inch in a year, 2.5 since adulthood. You sound like you're in the 2 range more recently, but as I say, your physician's monitoring that. So it doesn't have to be, it's just one of the ways of looking.
Any other question? Once you've had your first bone density test, how often over 60 should it continue taking place?
So again, yeah, it depends, Anna, on the results of that first test. If you're in the high risk category, you should be going every 1 to 3 years. If you're in the moderate risk category, it's possible you'd be going still within every 1 to 3. But if you fall within that low risk category, and it's not just the scan, but everything else, right? That whole family history, look at all your diseases, then it's more of a 5 to 10 year range. And you and your physician should have a conversation about that. But I would recommend that every time you have a bone scan, you have a follow-up appointment with your physician to take a look closely and plan out next steps.
So in other words, they should tell you what risk you're in.
Yeah. So yeah, they should. However, I fell into the moderate risk after my very first scan when I was 50, and my physician didn't follow up with me. I didn't follow up with her. And so by the time I found out I was high risk, I already had 7 vertebrae fractured. So follow up.
Thank you. I see Cam has his hand up. Cam?
And Judy did too. So
oh, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. That was very good. I have a question for you on nutrition. Could you tell us what's bad for us as far as bone loss density goes?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know of any foods that like leach calcium out. So I can't see that there'd like, I mean, I think one of the biggest challenges that I have read is to ensure you have a healthy weight so that you're able to do the exercises and movement you need to do, but I'm not aware of any foods that actually leach calcium out.
Okay, the reason I was asking is my mother had a hip fracture and they told her she was drinking too much coffee and caffeine.
Yeah, I think there's certain foods like alcohol and caffeine that reduce your absorption of calcium. And so ensuring that you're balancing that, like if you are, and again, going to that osteoporosis website, it'll say things like, if you do have caffeine, then it doesn't leach it out, it just slows the rate of absorption.
So like everything else in life, the fun stuff isn't always necessarily good for you.
Moderation is the key.
Yes.
Moderation. I think.
I see Judy. Judy, you have your hand up if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question, Judy.
I just wanted to thank Anne for me, what was a great refresher. I can't remember exactly how long ago I had my bone density done. But at the time, my doctor, who's very thorough, said, it's time, Judy, to get a basis for finding out, for future. Right. But I can't remember how many years ago that was. So it's probably time for another one regardless. I am losing height, but that 2.5 inches is a little bit reassuring because it's probably 2 inches for me. But that and all the stuff about food, I will certainly be going to your website to refresh my mind because I thought I knew, but obviously there's a lot of things that I could know better. So thank you very much. I've really enjoyed the presentation.
You're welcome, Judy. And I think, yeah, it's important if you've done that baseline, because I'd gone in for my baseline, but didn't follow through on it. And so by the time I went in for the second several years later, but if you haven't yet had an opportunity to do that baseline, it would be important to get in and do it. But you might be in the 5 to 10 range, right? So,
well, it's very, very concerning, I think, that you can have these spinal fractures, which are reducing your height without having a lot of back pain. That's, I think, something we should all think about.
Yeah.
I see that Jean and Mary, so I'll ask Jean first and then Mary. Jean, unmute yourself and you're set to go.
Thank you very much for a very good presentation, Anna. Concerning diet, I think mainly of dairy products as calcium sources. For somebody who is lactose intolerant, this becomes problematic. Personally, I use a soy milk instead of a dairy milk. Is soy effective as a source of calcium? And what else could I be using beside the beans?
So again, I would go on to the calcium calculator and toss in some of the things that you eat on a regular basis to see, you know, are they giving me a source of calcium? So broccoli does give calcium. You've got to eat an awful lot to hit your daily dose, but it does add in. So as I mentioned, the canned salmon, the type that's got the bones in it, that gives a source of calcium. Things like beef broths and so forth, that can help as well. But if there's something that you're wondering, like, okay, I wonder if, then go to that calcium calculator and take a look at, you know, some of the things you're wondering about, type them in, and it'll tell you whether it's a ½ cup or a cup or quarter cup and how many milligrams. And then you just take a look at those milligrams, and if you're tracking to the 1200 total, see where you are in terms of getting to that 1200 total. So I wouldn't, you know, I would suggest even spending the time to record what you've eaten in a certain particular day, and then going in and checking every item, like major item on that list, and then writing it down. You might be surprised to find either how low you are, which is sometimes happens, or how high you are. And then you can say, oh, if this is a really good source of calcium, I might add that. One of the other things is fortified orange juice is a good source. So I always make sure I have fortified orange juice, and then I do eat yogurt, and then I eat things like, I eat cheese, but I also eat my canned salmon and so on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jean, for that question. Mary, you have a question?
Well, actually, I wanted to say thank you. I was diagnosed with osteoporosis over 20 years ago, and I've been on medication. And I thought I knew most things about it, but I did learn some new things today. So I just wanted to say thank you. And I feel that it's a presentation that should be, you know, the audience needs to be broad, because there's a lot of excellent information there. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. And there is a ton of information on the website. And so, you know, it's a great source to go to. I appreciate you sharing. The audience should be broadened. I think this is where I go out to community groups such as yours and say, share it with a friend, go to another community group. And we do have to get into that younger age group too. So it's important to get to the 20 and 30-year-olds so that they can start developing great habits now, right?
I perhaps have one more question. If a person that has that figure that you were talking about, sloped over, protruding stomach, if they're very elderly, we're talking 90, would you say, what would your opinion be about treatment? Or is there at this point too late?
So I can speak to my own mom, who's 91. And she always fell into that mid-range of osteoporosis, had been on meds for several years, then taken off the meds. I want to say we went back to see her physician back in September just for a checkup. He didn't do a bone scan. He just did a calcium and kind of, examined how she was doing. She is very hunched over. And he put her back on meds to maintain the bone to the best of her ability. And it's because, the more we can maintain or decrease bone loss, the less chance that 91-year-old or whatever will stumble, fall, break a hip, and then that becomes a really serious complication. So yeah, my mom was put back on meds back in September. And so I would say, take the individual and make sure they see their physician. And there's different meds that are easier to deal with or less easy to deal with, like whether it's once a week, once a month. My mom's not on the daily injections, but we just upped her contacts with various different things, right?
Thank you for that. Are there any further questions? I don't see any hands up. And okay. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you. Anne, you've heard the thanks from a variety of people. Hold on to them.
Thank you.
You'll have a thank you from me, yes. But I want to say something about the way you go about speaking. It's clear, it's slow, not slow, low, but you speak very clearly and slowly so we can hear. Not just me, older people, but all people. Some people get in there and rush through whatever they present. That was excellent. And to put with that the information on the screen, and then you to help it, not just read it, but to help it to go into our brain. Excellent, Anne. Thank you very much. In terms of the food that you were mentioning, wonderful. But one of the things I read some time ago, and I can't remember how long that is. I'm almost 78 now, so. But Mediterranean food, evidently, is one of the better groups of foods for people with osteoporosis. And I don't know all the content of that, so I'm going to have to look it up again. But it was when you were speaking about it that all came back to me. So thank you for doing it in a way that we can hear and start to connect it within ourselves. And I didn't hear once you shaking the finger, voicely or otherwise. Excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. You must have been a teacher, right? Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much, Paul.
You're welcome.
And I add my thanks. And it was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. I got an awful lot out of it.
Yeah.
And I think we all did. And we hope perhaps maybe you'll come back to see us one of these days. That would be great. You're an excellent speaker. To everyone else, thank you for coming today. Anna?
Yes, Rowena, I'd just like to remind some of the people that are on that perhaps don't normally join us. This has been recorded, and the connection to the YouTube recording will be in the newsletter, and I can forward it also to Friendship Force, the people that weren't able to come. And also a reminder that we have a meeting a month from now, and I'm not sure, Jeannie, are you available to well, I'll say this, Jeannie was able to locate somebody for next month, and the speaker is John Boyko, the writer of the book, The Devil's Trick, and How Canada Fought the Vietnam War. And Jeannie and I are also watching a speaker this evening that potentially will be a speaker for April. We're going to see how the presentation is. So we have a few things in the pipeline coming to the club. So
Wonderful.
over to you, Rowena.
Anna, I think we have Jamie Doolittle coming in April.
Okay, we'll make sure that we won't double book April.
Yeah. Please
He
don't.
only needs 10 minutes.
Yeah, sure. I've never known Jamie take 10 minutes. Okay. For those that don't know, Jamie is our District 1 director, and he is retiring this year, and visiting every club. And he's been a wonderful director for PROBUS District 1. And we look forward to seeing him then. So everyone, we'll see you next month for John Boyko. I'm looking forward to that as well. Very interesting speech that will come. And again, Anne, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
We really appreciate you coming. So everyone, goodbye, and stay dry from the rain, and stay warm and keep out of the snow. So we're getting the whole gamut in the next 48 hours.
Well, ta-ra, Rowena. Ta-ra.
Goodbye. Ta-ra.
Thank you, Anne. Enjoyed your presentation.
Bye,
Anna.
everyone.
I'll
Anna.
stay on
Bye.
a little while, so if anybody wants to chat or talk, I will be here.
Yeah,
And
Anna, it's
Hannah's-
Norm here. I just want to thank you for making this available to the Friendship Horse.
You're welcome, Norm.
This was really a worthwhile session for us to be in. And so thanks very much for doing that.
You're welcome. Yeah, I thought it was very good. And you're more than welcome to join us next month again. I will send also to events the link at that time. Also, Hannah Mansfield, I don't recognize your name. If you'd send me your email address, then I can send you the link. If you're still there.
Hannah's one of our members, PROBUS members.
Okay, it's
Hannah.
just I didn't recognize the name on the screen.
Yeah. She's a long time member.
Are we talking about Hannah?
Yeah.
Hannah,
Hannah
okay, I
Mansfield.
didn't, okay, maybe she hasn't joined before and I've never seen it.
I've
I
never
know
seen
Hannah,
her.
I saw her on Sunday.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
That Hannah.
All right. I'm going to go and do my grocery shopping before it rains. Goodbye,
Okay,
everyone.
of course, I just never saw her name together in one piece. Of course, I know who it is. I see Donna. Hello, Donna. Oh, no. And Marion was there. Okay. Bye, Fran. Bye, Fran. Bye, Carrie. Okay, I'll just give everybody a minute more. Are you still there, Donna? Are you still there, Donna?